Hello, I'm Trudy Loban and I'm the founder of Arrhythmia Alliance. I personally have experienced losing a loved one to sudden cardiac death, my husband, which was awful. I can only begin to imagine what it must be like to lose a child. Today we're joined by Claire Page, who sadly lost her daughter, Lily May, when she was only 5 years old. And Claire has agreed to share the story to make others more aware. And hopefully we can end up saving more lives as people become aware of sudden cardiac arrest. Help us to place defibrillators in communities, because after all, an automated external defibrillator, an AED, is the only thing that will shock the heart back into a regular rhythm when a sudden cardiac arrest is taking place. So Claire, thank you so much for joining us. I know this won't be easy, and we really appreciate that you're going to share your story and what happened to Lily May.
Thank you for having me, Trudy. So Thursday, May the 15th, 2014, a day that I will never ever forget. I dropped my little girl, my 5-year-old daughter, Lily May Page Bowden, at school. And little did I know that I would not be taking her home with me at 3 o'clock. When I arrived at the school to collect her, she came running out with her friends. She had a jacket on. I'll always remember saying to her, "It's really hot, Lily. Why have you got your coat on? Come on, take your coat off." So we took her coat off. And then she told me how she'd been practicing sports day that day. And she'd actually won one of her races, which was remarkable for Lily because she wasn't very good at running. So she must have put her all into running that day. And she said to me, "Mummy, look how fast I can run." With that, she ran on. And it must have been seconds where I suddenly felt this something in my stomach just wasn't right. And I screamed for Lily. And I can remember pushing past parents because we had to walk past another classroom and they had been letting the children out. So all the parents were congregating. And I pushed through and I can remember just seeing her little feet. And she was laid on her back, perfect, hands either down at the side of her. And there was people walking past her. No one stopping. I was screaming. I had my mum with me. And I ran. I grabbed Lily. I had her in my arms. I must have slid underneath her. I don't know, but I grabbed hold of her. And I'll never forget her eyes just looking at me. And then they just rolled to the back of her head. And I was screaming for help. I didn't know what to do. I did not know what to do. And several people were phoning for an ambulance. And 2 women came over and asked if it was okay to perform CPR on Lily. And of course, we said, "Please, please, please save her, save her." And they started doing CPR. We later found out that they were actually, there were parents at the school, but they were off duty. One was a pediatric nurse and one was resus nurse. So Lily May actually had the best CPR she could have received. Sadly, there wasn't a defibrillator at the school. Unfortunately, the operator didn't tell us where the nearest defibrillator was. We don't know whether that's because they didn't hold that information at the time. We don't know. So we waited for the ambulance service to arrive. When the paramedics arrived and the air ambulance, the paramedic got out of the ambulance. She came over to Lily, didn't speak to anybody at all. Whilst all this is going on, mind, there's still children coming out of school. There's children that have come over from the secondary school up the road that are getting their phones out. They're trying to film what's happening. So there's a lot going on there. There's no one controlling the situation at all. I'm frantic. My mum's passed out at this point. So they just scoop Lily up and they run off with her. I then have a gentleman come out and he's asking me all the questions about Lily May. I later found out he used to be a paramedic. So he had jumped in the ambulance. He placed the defibrillator pads on her, well, placed the heart monitor pads on her. And she was in ventricular fibrillation, so a shockable heart rhythm. This is something that I didn't find out till a long time after. And they took her straight on to hospital. I wasn't allowed to travel in the ambulance with her. So the last time my daughter was alive was when she said, "Look how fast I can run, mummy." And we followed the ambulance in another ambulance. And when she arrived at the hospital, they applied the defibrillator and applied shock, because now 45 minutes later, she's still in ventricular fibrillation, but by now her life's futile. Her organs have shut down. So very sadly, my daughter was pronounced dead at approximately 4:10 that day. And I go back to when the paramedics arrived and Lily's heart rhythm being in ventricular fibrillation. It later ruled that the paramedic believed it was fine VF. VF is VF. It's a shockable rhythm. The only thing that will save you in ventricular fibrillation is a defibrillator. And sadly, there was not one on site. Had there been, my little girl would still be alive today. That is why it's so important for us to have defibrillators fitted in schools and throughout our communities. And yes, they are automated to use, but it's so worth attending an awareness session, attending a training session, and just being told, seeing how safe they are to use. And they're just a no-brainer. They save lives and they need to be everywhere. Thank you for listening to my story.
Thank you, Claire, for sharing your story. It's never easy, and we really appreciate it. And if by sharing your story, it just helps save one person, it's worth it. But let's hope it saves a lot more. And, you've been partnering with Arrhythmia Alliance, Defib Save Lives, Lily May Page campaign. Any money donated goes directly to the placement of AEDs in communities and in schools. You train, you teach, you raise awareness with us, for which we're so grateful. So anybody wishing to get involved, wishing to donate, please contact us, and all funds donated will go to the placement of these life-saving pieces of equipment. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Trudy.